Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, Beshear is making a gamble with his future. And in this gamble, he's decided to waste $410 million of Kentucky taxpayer funds. I will dig into that. Also, we're going to take a second to talk about Fayette County Public Schools. Many of you don't live in Fayette County, but much like the rest of the state, we have seen an extreme example of incompetence when it comes to our state. Incompetence that costs us money as a state, incompetence that really should be rooted out, and it points to the problems when you elect far-left crazy people. It shows as a warning to the rest of the state as to what you need to stay away from, as the city has literally told citizens to take care of the roads themselves and the sidewalks themselves when it comes to the snow. I'll explain. And we also have Republicans pushing for adding exemptions to the abortion ban here in Kentucky. Of course they are. We'll talk about who is doing it. We'll also talk about why this makes no political sense if the Republicans in our legislature decide to continue on down this road. We're going to have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before I dig into it, please make sure you leave a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. If you don't enjoy the show, don't feel like leaving a 5-star review, don't leave any review at all. I don't want a 4-star, don't want a 3-star, 2-star, 1-star. I only want your 5-star reviews. It helps spread the show out there. We're doing a show for you each and every day this week. We'll continue that trend as long as you all keep listening, and I see you all tuning in, so we will keep delivering to you that fantastic news and updates you're not getting anywhere else. But before I dig into my main stories, I want to talk about something I mentioned in yesterday's show where I was talking about a representative, a Democrat rep out of Louisville, who had introduced an important piece of legislation in her mind that dealt with something called ghost jobs. And I made a post about this in order to draw attention that this is a stupid thing. Of course, government should never have gotten involved with in the first place, dealing with these ghost jobs. And that is where a company posts a job. Well, what ghost jobs are defined as is when a company posts a job that they have no intention of actually filling or hiring for. And the point I made yesterday was that there's no way to go ahead and enforce this. It really isn't that big of a deal, and turning to government to solve all your problems is stupid. But apparently, my comments of calling out ghost jobs is dumb. I didn't explain myself super well in the post. I just called them out as a stupid thing to care so much about. Led to some people saying that I was wrong, that ghost jobs is a big problem and fraud, and it should be illegal. They support it. They have a big problem with it, and they want government to get involved. And I want to respond to those people because, once again, I'm not saying that, yeah, sure, it sucks companies would post a job they have no intention of hiring for. They shouldn't do that. I hear you. But my question to all of you, and this is my overall point, is how would you enforce it in such a way where you don't end up damaging small businesses especially, but damaging businesses and literally preventing jobs from occurring? How would you enforce it? Because today I'm going to talk about this Beshear situation too as well. And I think there's a disconnect on both the left and some members of the right, certainly some members of MAGA, where they don't understand that, you don't have a right to a job. You can't have a right to something you get from somebody else. But two, that when you put in place these regulations on things that annoy you, there is effects to that lead to problems. When you put in things like right now, there's been a bill filed by Democrats to raise the minimum wage. And they think this is a great idea, not realizing that raising the minimum wage doesn't help anybody because the labor market is a competitive market. Like, for an example, in towns like Louisville, Lexington, Northern Kentucky, nobody's making $7.25 an hour. Like, literally nobody is making that. McDonald's workers aren't making that. Warehouse workers aren't. Nobody's making that. Nobody over 18 certainly is making that kind of money. Nobody pays that anymore. And it's not because a law has come in, but because the competitiveness of the labor market. But when you come in and you artificially raise everybody's pay, you're only doing one of two things. You're either causing individuals to lose their job as they seek to automate more things because you've increased the costs of those positions. So you're going to mean less jobs. And two, when everybody has more money, nobody has more money. You don't want to make more money. You want to buy more things. That means you need things to not cost as much. You need people to have jobs that pay them, but you need there to not be a suck on individuals' paychecks. That should be more what you're concerned about, and that deals with government interventionism too as well. And so many times people have these problems. They fail to recognize how government creates those problems, or they fail to recognize that that's just the struggle. You're never going to live in a perfect world. Yes, a labor market means that you get paid based upon your experience and the labor available and the job you're completing and the value that compared to somebody else. But if you come in and try to artificially raise that cost, you end up eliminating jobs. In the same way that if you put in place these laws and regulations when it comes to ghost jobs that this Democrat representative has suggested, you will literally make it to where jobs go away. Not just HR jobs that are spent posting jobs, but you'll make it where companies literally can't hire people. They'll be in situations where small businesses can't grow, creating more higher quality jobs. I personally, and you can call me obviously a little biased here, but believe small business jobs are better jobs typically than large company jobs. You're more part of I don't want to call it a family because that's cliche, but you're more part of a group and an organization that shows you personal care and opinion and actually slightly cares about you more than just being a cog in the machine. But what you would essentially do by trying to eliminate ghost jobs, you would make it illegal for a company to post a job and not hire someone, period. That would be what you'd have to do because you have no way of knowing the intent of the company. Were they planning on hiring for that job, didn't find anybody? Were they planning on putting that job in place and then didn't make it happen, or weren't they? You don't know. There's no way to regulate this. Small businesses, especially ones that do contract work for other companies, may find themselves in a position where they're fielding a contract. The company's talking to them like, we're going to want you to start from here in 30 days, and we need you to start running. And that company may need to hire 30 people. That small business may need to hire 30, 40 people to service that contract. But they can't they don't actually have the signed contract yet, but they need to hit the ground running. So they start putting out jobs, collecting up applications. So when they get the contract, they hit the ground running. Well, if the contract doesn't get sent through, they'd never hire anybody for that job. They would now be charged, if they're a small business under 50 employees, $100 per job that they posted. For a bigger business, thousands of dollars. You don't have a right to it. Are you communists? Do you think you have a right to the job? You can't have a right to something you get from somebody else. Now, individuals are making arguments that this is some sort of type of fraud. What kind of fraud is it? Fraud that, like, you had to submit an application to a company and then they didn't look at your application. You want to say that's fraud? How do you prove that's fraud? These people complaining about, I've applied to ghost jobs and I didn't get hired and it's a waste of my time. How do you know it was a ghost job? How do you know? Because they didn't call you? Were you like, I'm clearly the best applicant they got, so obviously this must be a ghost job because they didn't hire me? Another argument I saw that people posted was, this is part of that H-1B visa claim. They got to post these jobs so they can then claim that they couldn't hire anybody here, so then they can bring somebody in. That's what they're doing. It's a fraud that way. That needs to be stopped. Look, according to H-1B Greater, there is in Kentucky, 2,000 in 2024, there was 2,000 H-1B job listings in all of Kentucky. That's at 2,000 in the entire state. That's it. These ghost jobs that you're complaining about has nothing to do with H-1B visas. And I get that that's an issue that is worth a discussion. It is. And I see the arguments people are making on H-1B visas where they're saying, look, you're bringing in this foreign labor, and then they will bring in more foreign labor, and they're not becoming a part of the American culture. Like, I hear all of that, and I agree with large parts of it. maybe if you think you've been applying to a lot of ghost jobs and you decide you want the government to step in, maybe it's got nothing to do with ghost jobs. Maybe you're just not that great of an applicant, and you got to take accountability for that. And that's the crux of the argument. See, when people turn to the government to solve their problems, like, please, government, create us jobs. Please, government, solve all our problems. It's about not taking accountability. And when you do that, you're providing opportunity for waste, fraud, abuse, and a gigantic flushing of taxpayer funds down the toilet. That raises the cost of things because it sucks away from your pockets and delivers you nothing. And we have a perfect example of that with the Beshear. Right now, what's going on with the Blue Oval battery plant. Beshear obviously is trying to make a run for president. That's pretty clear to everybody else. He's even being included on some polls. He's polling as high as 2% in some polls. The other 98% were like, who? And the other 2%, they accidentally picked Beshear, clearly. But he is clearly trying to make a run for it. The talking heads, the people within the Democratic establishment do like the guy. And he's eyeing it up. And he's now making a bet. And in the process, he's selling us Kentucky down a river. See, what Beshear's doing is he's willing to waste $410 million in Kentucky taxpayer funds in exchange for union support for his presidential campaign. So a little history here. You got the Blue Oval battery plant. That's Ford's battery plant there going on in Hardin County. They cut a deal back in the fall of 2021 where they received $410 million in taxpayer assistance, with $350 million of it being given to them in the form of cash, a forgivable loan. But now the plant's future is on shaky grounds due to unionization, and Beshear is cheering it on and pushing it forward. Now, let's keep in mind the plant has already slowed down construction. At first, they were supposed to bring 5,000 jobs. By this date, they've announced they're slowing that down. They're only going to build one of their two battery plants that they're building on site. Let us, to remind you that the federal government has given them billions of dollars as well in cash to build these plants. Don't forget that. Like, Ford's literally out nothing building these battery plants. And this last shutdown where Ford went on strike, the Ford workers went on strike, the union wanted a new union deal. One of the things that they discussed was the unionization of these electric vehicle battery plants and electric vehicle plants. And Ford is trying desperately to not unionize them, because Ford knows if they unionize their plants, they are DOA. They're dead on arrival into the electric vehicle manufacturing because they cannot compete. They can't do it. They will be undercut by other electric vehicle manufacturers, and they can't compete with the Asian companies that aren't unionized. So if you want the Ford to be able to produce batteries and electric vehicles and compete on the open market, you can't put artificial restraints on them like you're doing with forcing them to unionize jobs that just cost more. You have to pay people way more. The market elsewhere, people are willing to work these electric vehicle battery plants and electric vehicle jobs for $20 an hour. But if the Ford unions come in, they can force that amount up. They can wrap you into their contracts, and now you'll get paid more as an individual. Now, of course, that's short-sighted for the individual. They believe they will continue to have their jobs, and they'll just get paid more because they don't understand basic economics, that if a company has to pay people more, once again, it means that they will, one, seek to automate more, and two, well, the jobs may not exist at all. The question is, would you rather have a job paying you $20 an hour or no job? It's not, would you rather have a job paying $20 an hour or $35 an hour? Because for a lot of people, it is the option of no job. And that's a hard pill to swallow. That's something they don't want to accept. But that's something also companies can't even legally say to people. You may remember that a few years ago, Elon Musk made a tweet where he was trying to spell out the facts of unionization while there was talks of unionizing at a Tesla plant. And the Federal Labor Board came after Elon Musk for the tweet. It's actually working its way through the courts on whether or not they violated his First Amendment rights by telling him he had to take down the tweets because he was threatening workers supposedly for unionizing. So everybody knows. Ford knows. Beshear knows. We know. The market knows. Everybody knows, other than the people who are just out of their own, I don't want to call it greed, because, but people who think they're doing what's best for them, they're the only ones who haven't gotten the message, because, of course, the unions are filling them full of unicorns and rainbows about their futures. So they haven't gotten the message, but everybody else knows. If Ford, that battery plant, unionizes, it is done. The second one will never come online, and the first one will probably end up failing within a short amount of time. Now, because of that, Beshear has remained largely silent on the unionizing issue. However, that has changed recently. In fact, when we look at Beshear's Twitter, we see a few different posts where he has discussed his support now for the unions. This coming on January 14th, 2 days ago. He quote tweeted a Courier Journal article saying, am a strongly pro-union governor and always will be. I'm grateful for the jobs Blue Oval is creating, but the economy should remain neutral and let men and women in their facility decide what is best for themselves and their families. Now, this is an extreme deviation from what he has priorly done of just remaining silent. In fact, we've done shows about how Beshear has remained silent on the unionizing issue because he knows what will happen with that battery plant. But now he's changed with a nonsensical answer, but the company should remain neutral. So he's saying that Ford should remain neutral on whether or not the men and women in the facility want to unionize, because, it's only Ford who ends up having to pay these people. It's only Ford's business that's affected by it. It's only Ford's ability to be competitive in the electric vehicle market if they let it go through. But despite that, they should just, shut up and get over it, I guess, is what Beshear is saying. So that's nonsensical and makes no sense. But also it shows, once again, that he's deviating from his prior policy of remaining silent, because he's now making a bet. See, he knows he could step in here and say, look, Ford can't unionize, and speak the truth and save the Kentucky taxpayers the $410 million that they're on the hook for in these plants. That's state taxpayer funds. $350 million of it cash, once again. He could step in and say that. But he's got a future to worry about, and that future includes his presidential hopes. And he knows that getting the union support and money in a Democrat presidential primary would give him a huge leg up. So here's the bet he's making. He's saying that I know I will pay a political price, and the Democrat Party in Kentucky will pay a political price in Kentucky, at least, maybe nationally, for what I've done here with the Ford battery plant. It will end up blowing up in my face, most likely. But I'm willing to risk that it doesn't. But also, I'm betting that even if it does, it either won't happen while I'm running for president, or it maybe will, but the union support given to me will offset that political problem for me. And it should be a huge political problem, at least here in Kentucky. I mean, we still talk about Brady Industries, which was, 10 million, 12 million, I believe, that Bevin gave to a steel company that didn't come to fruition, talked about wasting. We're talking about here $410 million. That's a lot more. And he's making the bet. And you know what? He's probably right. I would say I'd be shocked if the fact that this battery plant doesn't go through because of things that Beshear's done, that he's wasted $410 million on a pipe dream. I'd be shocked if it actually hurts him politically nationally. But you know what? Kentucky will end up paying for it. And let's not forget, it was the Republicans who voted for it and enabled it to happen. Turning to Fayette County Public Schools. For those of you unaware, Fayette County Public Schools has been out of school since winter break started. They just went back today, I believe, for school, Thursday the 16th. So since they were supposed to return to school, I believe it was, the 7th or so, they have been out. So their first week and more than a week of school, they have been on snow days. Now, you may say, Andrew, it hasn't really heavily snowed here in days and days. Why were they still out? Well, they were claiming that the buses were getting stuck. And they were getting stuck because, frankly, the side roads weren't getting covered by the city. none of the side neighborhood roads were getting covered, and or large amounts of them weren't. And so what was ended up happening was that buses were still driving on sheets of ice in these areas, and were getting stuck. In fact, there were pictures posted of buses stuck and trucks having to pull them out. And of course, too, the school and city leadership didn't put in place a secondary snow route plan that would lead to kids walking to a bus stop, maybe, in order to make it. In fact, the city didn't have any plans for what to do if they need to start clearing sidewalks, so much so to the point that the Fayette County Public Schools posted on their websites or social media that if residents wanted kids to return to school to help get them back to school, I live in Lexington, but the residents of Lexington needed to shovel the sidewalks in front of their houses. Not just their driveways and areas that affect them, but the public sidewalks. You know, those things that were put in front of their houses that they never actually asked for, that is open to the public to use. It's a public use. That was built on public funds. That is supposed to be taken care of with public dollars. Well, now they want you to do the job of the city of shoveling and removing the snow from the sidewalks you don't even use. And I know I'm sounding like I'm personally complaining now, and I am a little bit, because I don't use my sidewalk. I have never used the sidewalk in front of my house. I don't use it. I get into my truck. I leave my driveway. That's it. I shoveled in front of my driveway where the snowplows put it in place in order to allow my wife to get in and out of the drive, in order to let the mailman stop. But I'm not shoveling the sidewalks on the public sidewalks. I'm not doing it. You call me lazy, call me whatever you want to. But it's ridiculous for Fayette County Public Schools. We've had snow now for 2 weeks when the blizzards hit. The blizzards hit 2 weeks ago, and in those 2 weeks, Fayette County Public Schools hasn't come up with another way to get kids to school other than blaming residents for not shoveling their walks. What do we pay taxes for? Once again, you tell me I'm wrong, but if I'm going to pay special taxes, I own a business in Fayette County, I have to pay, as an LLC in Fayette County, a special tax to the schools. The schools are spending in Lexington $20,000 a student. The city is spending millions of dollars on artwork. They spent $11 million a mile on a walking trail. And yet, we have to shovel ourselves the sidewalks for kids to be able to go to school? I think it's ridiculous. That got under my skin. It's like you've had 2 weeks. Figure it out. Send out the plow trucks. Clear the routes you need cleared. They're back to school today, so maybe they did figure it out, but geez, oh, Pete's. That's just complete lack of leader. This is all they do. Like streets and roads. This is their job, okay? There are people who are paid money, a lot of money, on the taxpayers' dimes to simply make sure kids get to school, and on the city side to make sure the streets are clear and people can use them. And yet, here we are. Like I said, you can call me a complainer, saying get over it, but, you know, I feel like we get screwed over a whole lot on taxes, that the simple things like, I don't know, clearing the road should be pretty simple to get done when it's been 2 weeks. I understand you can't do it right away. Don't expect you to clear my side roads so kids can go to school within the first hour or 2 or 3 or even day or 2, but it's been 2 weeks. Okay, moving on now. Moving on to something much more important. The state legislature, we've seen some Republicans putting forward exemption bills for abortion, for rape and incest. Now, obviously, these bills have huge issues. So let's say you're somebody who, for some reason, supports exemptions for rape and incest. I would ask you, how do you confirm that the child came from an act of rape or incest? Would you require that they have to file a criminal report of said rape and incest, that the person who did it should be apprehended and dealt with? That's my first question. The second question is do you think, and we've had this discussion, and it's a hard one to talk and debate about, but let's be honest here. Do you honestly believe that a human's life, once born, has different value because of how they were conceived? Do you believe that a child that is 1 month from being or 8 months along in the womb, that could literally be born and live and survive, and let's say the mother says, you know what, this child's due to rape or incest, I want to abort it. Are you okay with that? Are you comfortable with that? And the answer, I hope, unless you're a ghoul who believes in just murdering children for no particular reason, that is the fault of the child, of course your answer is going to be no. And so the argument has always been, when it comes to abortion, the real argument is, when do rights start? When is a human life a life? Conception makes a lot of obvious sense. And then if you believe that a human life gains value at conception, or at some other point for some reason, you had to defend your position. Conception you can make a claim of because you now have distinct and different DNA. You're now a distinct and different human being in that way. You have, like we said, your gender's already decided, your hair color, your eye color, all that's already been decided. We can make that argument there scientifically. Please make the argument why at 20 weeks, viability, some people would say, means you now have rights, which is a weird point to draw. But most importantly, why would, even if you believe, hey, look, I don't believe in abortion, but, rape and incest I'm okay with as long as it's before 20 weeks. Why does that matter? Why does before 20 weeks matter? Why not after 20 weeks? These are all questions you have to ask yourself and worth a discussion of having if you're somebody who supports that. But regardless if you do, I at least would hope you'd say, look, if we're actually having that many pregnancies due to rape, hopefully we're really cracking down on rape, which you would then hope that bills being filed here would require that in order to get an abortion for rape, you would then have to at least file a police report on it. There'd be heavy time constraints, a lot of other things if you are that type of person. But more importantly, it leads to a greater question here. It's pretty clear so far within the state that there really hasn't been a case that has at least not been able to get an abortion or deal with in whichever way or what have you, where somebody's been raped and then has been forced to carry a child to completion. We know that because the Democrats haven't found that person to bring up. The ACLU hasn't brought a case against Kentucky involving that individual. And of course they would if they could find somebody that falls into that category, because it's just frankly exceedingly rare that it occurred. That's why 99.99% of abortions in the first place were done outside of those reasons, rape and incest. But it is interesting that I'm seeing some people with some consternation on this. There's no good reason why Republicans within Kentucky, from a political standpoint, should care about this. Some Republicans would try to make an argument that, yeah, I hear you, Andrew, but if we want to permanently win on the issue and stay in control, we need to be for exemptions. And I've made this point time and time again. Even when abortion was on the ballot in that abortion amendment, Republicans gained seats. Republicans have not lost seats in Kentucky in the legislature. Why do you continue to think abortion is this giant problem for Republicans here in Kentucky when it hasn't played out politically in that way at all? In fact, the evidence points to the fact that maybe citizens have different opinions on it, but it's really not changing whether or not they would vote for a Republican. Their view on abortion doesn't change that. So putting that, though, to the side, it is interesting to see who the sponsors is, one of which is Vanessa Grasso. One of the first bills she sponsored was, of course, an abortion repealing a bill. And my point of bringing that up is those of you who listen to the show for a long time know that Vanessa Grasso is a former Democrat, has a very liberal background, and I called her out at the time, and I made the point that you'd be better off with Sherilyn Stevenson than Vanessa Grasso. And there's a few Republicans who got upset at me for saying that. They're like, no, she is better than that. And now you're seeing the examples. Now you're seeing why that's not true. Because a Democrat proposing exemptions for abortions, the bill doesn't go anywhere. But a Republican proposing it, now the bill can move somewhere. Isn't that interesting? it is certainly deals into the point that you got to be, when we have 80% of the seats in Kentucky in the legislature, we need to be choosy about who we support and why we support them. Well, y'all, that's what I have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. Back here tomorrow. Hope you have a great rest of your day.